talking about journeys, destinations, culture, adventure, gear, conservation, and all the things we haven't yet thought of.
This episode is brought to you by Taking the Pea, the fun, cheeky snack brand giving the humble British-grown marrow-fat pea a serious upgrade. Roasted and coated in the nation's favourite crisp flavours: cheese and onion, smoked ham, sweet chilli, or a punchy wasabi kick. High in fibre, a great source of protein, less than 100 calories per portion, they are a healthier alternative to crisps. Go on, it's time to take a chance on pea!
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the At Overland Europe podcast. My guest is Elspeth Beard, architect, author, and the woman who rode a motorbike around the world in the early 1980s, long before content was a thing, and when being generally off the map was, well, just normal. But here's the twist. We're not doing a neat little recap of the famous trip. We're talking about what stayed with her. What happens when you come home and nobody really gets it. How travel rewires your tolerance for boredom. How a dyslexic kid written off at school builds a life fueled by grit, problem solving, and a refusal to be boxed in. We also go deep into her second life, the architecture. Converting water towers, lighthouses, windmills, listed buildings, the projects other architects wouldn't touch. And you'll hear how the skills you learn on the road, persuasion, resilience, improvisation, translates straight into real-world battles with rules, regulations, planners, and the slow grind of normal life. And then we get into the modern world. GPS, social media, fear-driven news cycles, and why Elspeth still believes you should get lost on purpose. If you've ever felt the pull to travel, or you've come back and wondered why home feels strange, this conversation makes sense. Right, let's get into it. Where are you sitting? I love that.
I'm in my office, actually. I'm in my office. I don't know whether you can see,
Whoa.
It's an old stable building. It's a listed building, and it used to be owned as part of the hotel, which I bought the building off. It's like a back bit. So basically the hotel is, I think, some Russian Tsar stayed in the hotel in 1680 something or whatever, and so it's a really old hotel, and these buildings at the back of the hotel used to be stables. So it's where they used to keep all the horses and the carriages and the poor people who used to drive them, used to have to sleep up here with all the hay and everything. So it's basically the old stable buildings for a very 15th century hotel in Godal.
Nice.
So, but when I bought it, there was a kind of flat ceiling, and you couldn't see any of these timbers or any of the roof at all.
Right.
And so I had to do quite a lot of work to it.
Quite something.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Did you do this as as the architect, or do you actually sort of roll up your sleeves and get in there as well?
Well, when I built the water tower, I did a lot of building work. I mean, for 7 years, I did a lot of. I did all the plumbing, drainage, built all the floors, most of the walls, not all of them. Things like I did get people in to do the plastering, for example, because that's a bit of a skill. And because I had to do all the works to the outside of the tower. So the scaffolding was up for 9 months. So I had to get somebody to put scaffolding up. Obviously, I wasn't going to do that myself. And then I got all these brickies to do all the brickwork repairs as well. So there were certain elements of work that I wasn't really able, and I was working full time as well. So it was a sort of balance of how much money I could earn how much the various items of work cost and how I felt, whether or not I felt I could do them or not. So, but yeah, I basically DIY'd every single weekend and every single evening for about 7 years. So, yeah, but by the time I came to this building, I thought, no, I'm DIY'd out. I freaking hate it now. You know, whenever, even at home now, when it comes to simple things like just putting up a picture, not that I do that much anymore, but I can't bear it. You know, I just can't bear it. and then of course, like an idiot, I bought this house in Italy 5 years ago, and I ended up doing it all again there. So now I really hate it. I just can't stand it. But I'm actually quite, you know, I'm pretty good at doing most things I turn my hand to, if you know what I mean.
Life's lessons learned.
Indeed.
Fantastic. So let's have a talk about not necessarily the book itself, but you wrote Lone Rider, and that is what a lot of people know you for. But what stayed with you, let's say, since the journey and since the book? What sort of experiences have you taken from what you did on your journey and put into real day-to-day life?
Oh, so much. I mean, and actually writing the book was a very interesting process, because it was actually writing the book was where I realized how much the journey I had done 40 years earlier had shaped the rest of my life. I mean, it was an extraordinary, life-changing experience. But it was odd, because when I got back in 1984, I didn't really have time to think about what I'd done or what I'd learned from it, or, you know, you just get on with life. You just move on and you get on to the next thing. And I went back to study architecture and finish my degree. And then I became an architect. Then I bought the water tower. Then I became a mother. And, you know, life just moves on. You don't. And so I never really thought about or realized how pivotal that doing the trip was in my life, and how it very much shaped me as a person and very much gave me, I suppose, the courage and the confidence to take on other things in life and other challenges in life, which led to me buying the water tower, led to me starting up my own architectural practice. I mean, everything just feeds off it. It was so. But I think, you know, my trip taught me that I could do anything. I could do anything. I could deal with anything, and I could tackle anything. And there was nothing. Nobody could. If I was determined to do something, nobody was going to stop me. If I knew I was right in what I was doing and what I wanted to achieve, I would just persevere, and nobody would stop me from doing it. And it gave me the courage and the confidence to fight on no matter what, to get where I wanted to get to in life and achieve the things I wanted to achieve.
It's interesting, because I will now make a reference to the book, because before you left, you wrote to various editors, etc., to see if they'd be interested, and there wasn't sort of a huge, wow, yes, we want to be involved in that. So there wasn't like somebody or anybody pushing you along saying, yeah, you should do this. You've always had that drive to be able to think of something, make a decision, and to do it.
Yes, I think that's true. I think I've always, I kind of felt I always needed to prove myself a bit in life when I was growing up, when I was in my teens, and I was dyslexic at school, and at the time in the late 1970s, there wasn't much known about dyslexia, and so most dyslexics, or not most, but a lot of dyslexic children were just written off as stupid. And, you know, it's a difficult time anyway in life when you're trying to work out who you are. And I think to be constantly told that you're stupid is, I think you can either take it one way or the other. You can either ignore it and say to yourself, no, I'm not stupid, and I'm going to bloody well show you I'm not stupid, or you go the other way, and you don't do so well. And I think, and I mean, I've met people who were badly dyslexic, and they took a slightly easier path in life. I mean, for whatever reason, I decided, or I knew I wasn't stupid, and I didn't know what the problem was. I couldn't understand why I couldn't read or write particularly well, or at all. And for whatever reason, I just said, I'm not stupid, and I'm going to show you I'm not stupid. So I suppose I always had that in the background, that I had to prove myself somehow. And my parents, they were both great achievers, and they expected a lot from us. And so I think being dyslexic and written off as a bit of an idiot, it just kind of gave me this fighting spirit, I suppose. And I don't know, I just kind of knew, in a way, I sort of knew who I was at quite an early age. I kind of, and I didn't really pay much attention to what people said. I think I learned to ignore it and not really listen to it. And I think once you get like that, then you know what you want, what you want to do, and you're not going to let anybody stop you do it.
There's a couple of things in there which sort of make me think. One is that dyslexia had you put into a box, if you like, because you were unable to read and write as maybe other people did. You were given this label, potentially, of being, let's say, stupid. But did you find that affected you in other ways as a child and growing up and as a student, that was slightly separated from the rest of the community around you? The reason I ask is because you were moving from a family, from student life, into solitude. And that can be really a challenge on its own, riding or doing something for a long period of time like you did, and being alone during that period. So one, did it affect you to make you, let's say, separate from others, but also maybe ease your way into traveling alone?
Yes, I think that's probably true. I think I always felt different. I always felt I didn't belong. I wasn't, and I think being dyslexic at school, you learn to be sort of adaptable. You have to find ways around covering up the fact you can't read. So you become very good at say thinking out of the box. And I mean, for example, for me, the thing I dreaded most was when I had to stand up in class and read from a book. I mean, to me, that was just, it was excruciatingly painful. Everything else, if I had to, write something, or if I could read to myself, I could work it through and I could read it really slowly and sort of work out. But to stand up in class and have to read in front of the whole classroom, I mean, that was just agony for me. And the only way I could fortunately, because my name began with B and I was the second in the alphabet, the register, I could pretty much work out which part of the book I would get to be asked to read. And so I would go to the loo in the evening, the night before the class, and I would read this, the 2 or 3 paragraphs, 20 times. Trying to work my way through it and try and work out what the words were. So it wasn't totally total agony when I had to come and read it in class. So, but that's what I mean. And so you just learn to adapt to, and I was very good at covering it up to a large extent. And I think that does make you sort of, retreat into yourself a little bit. You do feel quite alone. And, that I had nobody I could talk to about it. So I had to sort of work it through myself and muddle through. And I suppose that does make you fairly resilient and not afraid of being on your own. I didn't necessarily choose to ride around the world on my own. That wasn't. I just wanted to ride around the world, and there was nobody else that I knew who wanted to do it. So I thought, well, I'll do it anyway. So it's not that I set out to do it on my own. It's just, to me, the more important thing was doing the trip. But it was very lonely. It was very lonely.
How was it then when you came back from the trip? I mean, I've heard from other long-term travellers that coming back into what we call normal civilization, back into the community, can be really challenging as well. How do you find that?
I found it really difficult. I felt even that I belonged even less than I felt before I left on the trip. It was, and I think it was partly because I wasn't prepared. I hadn't prepared myself for it. And I think if you prepare yourself for things, I mean, for like when I left on the trip, I prepared myself, I'm likely to be, hassled. I'm likely to have problems. My bike is likely to break down. And so you can sort of mentally think of these things and prepare yourself, which makes it easier to deal with. But when I got back, I had this clearly a bizarre reason, thinking that people were going to be interested in what I'd actually done. But of course, nobody was that interested, which, I look back now and I said, well, why should they be? But at the time, I sort of did expect a little bit of interest. And I think it wasn't the fact that it was lack of interest. I just think it's lack of understanding and lack of being able to relate to what I'd done. And also because 5 years ago or whatever, the whole world wasn't open to travel. So it was, now so many people travel. It's much easier for other people to feel that they can understand when you're talking about what you've done and where you've been and what you've seen. But 40 odd years ago, it was just so totally different. And especially to do it on a motorbike and then to go through all those pretty extreme situations that I found myself in and had to battle my way through because I was on a motorbike and because I chose to travel the way I did. It was just beyond most people's comprehension to even start to understand what I had experienced. So I felt even more isolated and more lonely when I got back because I felt as if I had, I didn't feel that I had very much, I didn't really feel, my friends, I could really talk to them, and my family, I couldn't really talk to either. And so I just hid myself in a basement for like 6 weeks. And then gradually over the next, year and a half, I suppose, I managed to get myself out and about a bit more. And I made myself, well, I didn't make myself, but I went back the following year back to uni to finish off my architecture degree. But again, I struggled through all of that. I thought that the whole thing just seemed pointless to me. And, it was also superficial, I think, and so easy and so sort of meaningless and boring, to be honest. All the sort of excitement of living this incredibly intense time of having to battle and survive and deal with problems and every day, and then suddenly you don't have to deal that's just all gone. All you have to worry about is what you're going to have for breakfast, and it was all just on a different, and it just seemed just really boring, and I felt completely lost. And it must have taken me 2 or 3 years to, I mean, I wouldn't actually say I've ever really slipped back into normal life. I like to hope I haven't anyway. I just deal with it. But it does separate you out, and you don't really feel like, I don't know. I always felt slightly different, but I think the trip made me feel even more different when I got back.
I think you came back a lot stronger, though, because the challenges, let's say the dyslexic challenges beforehand, they may have seemed big at the time, but what you actually did during the 2.5 years of travel, I mean, that was huge. So how do you feel that what you learned being alone, traveling, and all the challenges you had to face then, how's that influenced the way you've continued with architecture and then created your own business and taken on magnificent projects?
Yeah, well, that's quite interesting, because it's very because I never really thought about the kind of architecture I wanted to do, or I just kind of fell into the kind of work I do, because without really planning it just sort of happened, and I think it all started with the. After I was still at uni doing my, I was in the final year of my uni, so I wasn't actually qualified yet, and that's when I found this water tower, and it was a monumental project, and I didn't really, when you're young, you just don't see all the work. You just go, I want to buy it. And it was it's a 130-foot high Victorian water tower. I mean, it's like a 12-story building, and and I bought this thing, and it took me 7 years, and even I, who are normally quite good at estimating what things are going to involve, totally underestimated the work and the challenge of trying to convert this water tower. But anyway, having got through that, I then started up my own practice, and I became known as if anybody had a water tower or a lighthouse or a windmill or whatever, they'd come to me. I was the expert. I was the water tower expert. And so I started to specialise in converting those types of buildings, and then that branched out into other unusual buildings like power stations and pigsties and barn conversions, and so that's really what I specialise in doing. So I sort of repurpose old buildings, and I take. Most of them are listed buildings, so they're beautiful historic buildings which weren't originally built as a house. So it's all sorts of types of buildings, which means that every single building is different. Every building has a different challenge. Every building you have to think out of the box in a slightly different way in order to comply with the building regs, or to get the planning approval, or to keep the historic building officer happy that you can convert the building. So it really was, and I never ever like to do a similar project again. So I only did projects that I knew were going to be really tricky and really difficult and a real challenge. And we actually had a joke in the office that every project that no other architect wanted to touch ended up on my desk. And that was actually pretty true, and sometimes I'd look at these projects and you'd look at this thing and think, how the hell am I going to do that? How am I going to work? How am I going to get the means of escape or the fire regs, or how am I going to deal with that? It was just impossible absolutely impossible. But then you start to think, and you think of different ways, and then it was also you then had to deal with planners and historic buildings officers, and persuade them and coerce them into your way of thinking. And come on, I know it doesn't quite comply, but look at the building. It's an amazing building. It's make a perfect house. You're going to save the building for another 100 years. All this kind of stuff. So it was almost like using my, the skills that I had learned trying to get through borders and trying to persuade officials or customs officers or whatever to allow me to get my bike through or allow me through their country. It was just using those skills, but in a different way to try and persuade and whatever council officials, planning officers, historic building, or whoever to, bend the rules just a little bit, because this is a special case, it's a beautiful building, special case. And I suppose, and I enjoyed it, I felt as if I was pushing the boundaries a little bit all the time. And you got a great sense of achievement when you manage to get planning approval on something when everybody had told you you'll never do it, it's impossible. Same as the water tower, you'll never do it, it's impossible. And so, it was it's hard work, but it's very interesting work, and it kept me interested in the projects and the work and so. And I think that whether I would have ended up doing that kind of work had I not done my trip, I don't know. I don't think I would have done it as well as I think, I did do some pretty amazing projects. I had a good team in here as well in the office. And we did do some, pretty amazing projects. So, which I'm very proud of, and saved lots of old, historic buildings, which is always nice to do.
Definitely. Seems you've carried your endurance and, I don't know, I wouldn't say stubbornness, but if you see something, you're definitely going to go and get it. And then you've thrown in the traveling skills and the communication skills and, your will to keep going.
I think it's just, I just don't think that there is never a problem that can't be solved. There's
Brilliant.
Always a way around it. There's always a way you can work your way through it, around it. And it's just, and it's thinking of all those different ways you can do it. And it means that every project is different. Every challenge is different. Everything that gets that particular building throws up is different. And that's what keeps it interesting.
Yeah, amazing. But that's real life and real life, isn't it? You've got the real life of traveling, you've got the real life of your business. And I personally have a sort of a relationship to what you're doing as an architect, because my mother used to buy up houses in London and in the countryside and literally strip them out, rebuild them, and then put them back on the market again. And I was always living in these building sites as we moved around. And one of the projects she had, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, is Charlton Park down in Kent. It's a magnificent building. But I saw there, even in my youth, all the sort of the headaches thrust upon her and how she had to battle through that. But she was also dyslexic. But the other thing is she didn't have your, let's say, wider vision of the world. She hadn't traveled the way that you traveled. And I think that anybody who's traveled for a long period of time, they certainly have a better feeling for people, for new circumstance, and obviously surprise circumstance as well. So it's interesting to hear your story as to how sort of you've gone through and how you face problems and work your way through them. Yeah,
but it was almost as if, and I suppose in a way, taking on the kind of projects that I did during my, it sort of almost gave me that that sort of feeling of being on the road again, that sort of intense thing of having to solve problems, and it's just this thing of feeling alive. That and as I say, that's sort of how I achieved a similar sort of feeling through my work that I had done when I was on my trip and riding my bike around, that I really missed when I first got back and felt totally lost. So it was kind of directing it, I suppose, into a more just a different but more useful way.
Your life has been, I think it's almost more than one life, isn't it? You've been the rider, the architect, mother, and writer. Did you ever feel you had to shake yourself a little bit and say, right, I've got to focus on this first of all and continue doing this? Or was it always for you easy to keep the mix together?
I felt it was fairly easy to keep the mix together. I mean, I did after I got my after I bought the water tower and I finished my architectural degree, I worked for a practice in London, and before I started up my own practice, and so I did struggle a lot then, and I did. I mean, I hadn't quite worked things out yet, so I hadn't quite worked out how I was going to make architecture work for me and keep me interested. And I did still travel quite a lot. Fortunately, I had a very understanding boss who used to let me disappear off for 3 or 4 months at a time. And so I still needed this to feel this sort of freedom and being on the road again. But it was in shorter periods of time, and then I'd come back and work, and earn the money, and then do another trip and another trip. So it was, I suppose, that was the halfway house. And then after about 10 years of that, I then decided to. Then the water tower was pretty much finished, and I sort of won a few architectural awards for it. And it was on the strength of those awards, I decided to set up my own business. But even then, I didn't really think about, I don't think when you're young, you think about stuff like that. You plan stuff like that. I didn't anyway. I just did what felt right at the time. I mean, I was working for this practice in London. Oh, now I'm bored. Right, I want to go on I want to go away for a bit. Right, I'm going away. Then I go away. Then I said, right, I need to earn some money. I'll come back. Then I'll come back. And then while I was doing all this, I was building the tower, and then the tower was finished, and then I won the awards. I was like, I might as well start up my own practice, because I was driving up and down to London every day. I was really, really fed up with that. So I did that. So I didn't really plan it. And then I suppose for the tower, all the traveling was put on the back burner for a bit. And then I became a mother. So that sort of for 4 or 5 years, that kind of overtook. I mean, I was still working full time, building the tower and being a mother. But my motorcycling, that kind of went on the back burner for probably 5 or 6 years. So I didn't really manage to do all of the things all of the time, and certain things, come and go in your life. But I don't know. It's not really something I was ever conscious of. I just did what I felt right at the time, and don't know.
Just kept moving forwards.
Just kept moving forward, exactly. Always got to be moving forwards. As long as I was moving forwards, that was fine, exactly.
Well, let's take moving forwards as a cue, because between getting back from the trip and to writing the book, decades passed. Was there anything which had to settle before you could embark on that project, or was it everything else there was too much going on which didn't give you the time? I
think I just didn't think about it, to be honest. I never intended to write a book. It was, I did the trip. No one was interested. That's okay. Did my degree, became an architect, mother, water tower, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, to me, my life had just moved on. I didn't think about my trip. It was never on my mind to write a book at all. And that was a complete accident. It was only a friend. And because really, I mean, you know, for 35 years, nobody really knew about my trip at all. I mean, I never mentioned it. I mean, friends and family knew, but they never talked about it. It was just something that I kind of did and was buried in a cupboard somewhere. And it was only when a friend of mine was talking to somebody at BMW who mentioned what I'd done. And they said to him, he was a journalist. And so they said to him, well, why don't you write a short little story and we'll put it up on our international website. And that was the very first time my story was told. And that was in 2008. So that was 35 years after I got back. And, you know, and the whole thing just went viral, which I had absolutely no idea about at the time. So for the next sort of slowly, but for the next three years or 4 years, my story spread all over the internet and just sort of took on a life of its own. And I was completely oblivious to it. I mean, I never you're not going to Google yourself. So I had no idea all of this was happening. And then I was contacted by this agent in Hollywood in 2014 who had found my story and wanted to buy the rights to my story to make a film. So, I mean, completely out of the blue. So it was just totally bizarre. And this is what I mean in life, you see. It's I always see life as this way where you throw out sort of all these seeds during your life, and some of them grow, some of them can sit there for a long time and then they grow later, or they die, or whatever. And so it's all these different things sort of come, and I think things have their time as well. And I think, you know, this was now the right time. And it was all the Me Too stuff going on. And so they thought this is a really strong, empowering story, blah, blah, blah. So I was flown out to Hollywood and met all these these script writers and producers and stuff. And I thought, my God, people actually are sort of interested in my story. And it was the first time it occurred to me that people actually seemed to be interested in it. So, but I kind of decided, well, I felt that Hollywood had their own agenda. And it wasn't going to be really what my story was probably all about. And I didn't really know then what my story was about, to be honest. It was, you know, because it's not just about riding around the world on a motorbike. It's everything else that goes around that and has come from that, and how the whole thing ended up being in a book. That's really more the story. And so anyway, I said thanks, but no thanks to Hollywood. And that's when I came back and set about writing my book. And that was in 2015. So, you know, and writing my book, I mean, it was a monumental task. I mean, I hadn't looked. I mean, I had this cardboard box in this cupboard that had been there for 40 years by then. And I hadn't looked at anything. It was my photographs, diaries, all my documentation, letters, all sorts, everything, just all thrown in this box. And I actually got some help with the book. I found this sort of ghostwriter, and he spent a year just trawling through all of my stuff, basically. And it took him a year just to put everything in the right order and read all my letters and date them all and put them all and where I mean, although I knew my basic route, there was so much stuff around it that was so he pieced it all and did the kind of framework of the book. And then I sort of took that and put it in my own words and whatever, and rewrote it about 30 times. And so it was kind of like it was my voice. And then I eventually found a publisher, and then it was eventually published in 2017. But to be honest, when I published it, and even when I was writing the book, it felt incredibly good just to get it out of my head, if you know what I mean. It was really nice to be able to unload it all. I'd felt for like 30, 40 years, I had all this incredible stuff that I was constantly having to keep hold of in case, I didn't remember it. And all of a sudden, just putting it down on paper, it was a huge release and a huge sense of almost freedom from it, really. And it felt great. And it was writing the book that made me realize how pivotal the trip had been in my life, and how I had learned all the lessons that I had learned but taken for granted when I got back. I didn't think it was that amazing, thinking, well, there isn't a problem I can't solve, because there isn't, So, and when you have those skills and you don't really analyze them, or you just use them and carry on with life. So it was a very interesting process writing the book, and I laid a lot of demons to rest, which was nice. And whether it was published or not, actually, I didn't really care. It was just getting it out and getting it down on paper, so maybe my grandchildren could read it one day. But, whether I published it or not, I didn't really care. I did when I started writing the book, but by the time I was halfway through and finished the book, I didn't really care whether it was published, because the whole process had been so liberating for me. It had done more than I'd ever expected it to anyway, just by the whole physical thing of writing it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, finally found a publisher, and it was published in 2017. And then I didn't really expect it to be that, I didn't really think about whether it was going to be well received or not, or people were going to read it. It was just, it was out there. So
did you find that when you probably had to revisit your journals quite a lot as well during the writing process. Did you find there were things which, I don't know, were somewhat enlightening or sparked and were surprises looking back? Some things maybe you'd forgotten? Or were there things which you looked at and thought, wow, now I'm looking at it with a different pair of eyes much later in life, and it has a different effect on you?
Not really. I think there were obviously incidents that I had forgotten. There were people I met on the road that I'd forgotten about. But it was all still kind of there. I didn't look at anything. There were certain things that I did, and I thought, oh, you idiot, why did you do that? Or whatever. But then I was looking at myself. I was looking at a very young, naive, inexperienced 23-year-old Elspeth. And, I think I did pretty well.
I think a lot of people will agree with that, definitely. Travel's never left you, or you've never left travel. You've always gone off on your smaller, shorter adventures. But now you're looking forward to a next adventure, a next trip, aren't you?
Well, now it's great. my life, and it's just really odd, isn't it? Life is just, yeah. So now it's over the last sort of 6 or 7 years since my book was published. Now I'm sort of almost gone full circle, and now I've pretty much given up most of my architectural work, which is fine. The whole thing is so onerous these days with all the rules and regulations. It's taken all the fun out of designing, if you ask me. But so now, as a completely natural process, I'm just doing I'm traveling now, and I get invited to do motorcycle trips all over the world, to give talks all over the world, to give book tours here, book tours there. My book's been translated into Italian, Spanish, French, and currently into Ukrainian, which is quite extraordinary. So, I've just been kind of transported to like a whole different world from what I ever imagined I would be doing now. I just thought I'd carry on running my architectural practice for as long as I could. But actually, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to have fun. I want to travel. I want to ride motorbikes for as long as I can, while I still can. And so, my life has just taken another turn, and the fact that that the trip that I did 45 years ago that completely transformed my life when I did it in my early 20s, then almost has come full circle and now has completely changed my life again at the age of 65, 66, which is, I just find it really bizarre. And none of it was planned at all. I just kind of followed my nose and just did what felt right every step of the way, without any long plan, nothing like that at all. It's just I let it all unfold and happen, and I didn't force anything, which is what I don't. I think sometimes, it's obviously certain things in life you have to go out and get them and make them happen, but I think there are other things in life you need to let it take its course in a way. I think you need to be prepared to take risks, and not be afraid of failing, and all those sorts of things. And I think if you can do all of that and just do what feels right at the time, and obviously enjoy life, that's the main thing as well while you're on this road. I think it's I think you need to have the flexibility and allow things just to happen, and then and grasp the opportunities and not be afraid of taking them. I could have written my book. It might have been a huge failure. It might have been a complete waste of three. But if you don't try these things and you don't do these things, then you never know. And everything I do, I always do I'm probably a little bit obsessional, to be honest. I do strive to do, well, I think a lot of people do, to do everything to the absolute best of my ability. And I don't like fudging things. I don't like kind of thinking, that'll be all right, No, it's got to be, so you have no regrets. So if I don't think if somebody said to me now, would you rewrite any bits of your book? Would you change any bits? And there's not a single thing in my book I would change or rewrite, because it's exactly as I wanted it. And that's because I rewrote it 30 times, and I spent 3 years doing it. And I made sure every single date in every single beginning of every single chapter, the 26th of June, 1983 was exactly the date that I arrived in that town in India or whatever. It is absolutely accurate. And I've even got all my petrol, where I bought petrol, how much I spent on it, all that at the back of the book. And so, I do like, I suppose being an architect, I'm a bit of a detail person. But so because, you just have to feel that whatever you do is the best of your ability. Therefore, whether it fails or not, you don't you don't have to say, oh, I wish I'd just done that, or oh, I wish I'd just done it a bit, I should have tried a bit harder. No, you always try absolutely 100%. You make it as perfect as you think you can get it, whether it's a building, whether it's a book, whether it's whatever you do. And you just put it out there and it goes where it goes. And then if it doesn't go, whatever, I couldn't have done any better. And that's what I like to feel with everything I do in life. I could not have done any better.
On reflection, I'd say that's the sort of the thread which has gone through your whole life, because, as you said a moment ago, you don't want to fudge anything. Well, as an architect, you certainly can't. You've got people looking over your shoulders. You've got all the regulations which you have to somehow get through. On the other hand, as a 20-something young woman traveling on a motorcycle, you can't fudge anything there either, because it's going to hurt. It could kill you. Whatever. So every step of your way has been always not having to, but automatically doing things to the best of your ability.
Yes, I think that's true, definitely. And that's what, and I think that's one of the things which helps, with being with the success that I have had in life, whether it's with my architecture or motorcycling. It's, as you say, it's that thread that's gone through everything. They're just always doing things as good as you can.
Yeah. I think we're now in whatever it is, 2026, and people who embark on a journey today are in my eyes, in a completely different world. What you said earlier on was hit the nail on the head, that you'd done this trip. People in your local or tight community weren't particularly interested. It took decades before you wrote the book, and a spark came because one journalist said to a BMW dealer something, and it started to develop. Today, somebody going on a trip, they're all over social media. Basically, anybody and everybody can find out about what somebody's doing today, thanks to popular social media. Do you think if that had been a thing at the time in the 80s, would that have affected anything you did?
I think we all use whatever we have at our disposal when we're doing whatever we are in life. I'm sure if GPS had been around in 1983, I would have thought, yeah, great, that's going to make my life a lot easier. But the fact that, because I think one of the incredibly valuable thing that I got, well, the sort of experience was this feeling of being totally and utterly alone. Nobody knows where you are at all in the world. There's nobody, you're not tracked, you don't have a phone, you have absolutely nothing. You have no, the communications are just, and that is something I think is so sad these days, because it's not something you can achieve anymore. That feeling of being out in the world entirely on your own, living off your wits. You have no backup at all, and so if you make the wrong decision or you make the wrong choice about something, as you said, it could be it can be life threatening. It can it's serious stuff. It's not, so I think all that has been taken away. And so you can't get this feeling where you really are completely pushed to your absolute limit, where you have to make a decision which is going to determine whether you live or die. And you're not just doing that once in the whole trip. You're doing that almost constantly, all the time. You're having to make those decisions, and you get used to making them because you have to. And somehow you always make the right decision. Well, I managed. Well, no, yeah, I think I pretty much. Well, I'm still here, so I couldn't have made that many bad decisions. But I think it's that, and it's that what kind of makes you. That's what gives you resilience and courage and a real inner strength to know you can cope and deal with anything, because you because you can, and you can look after yourself, and you don't need anybody. You don't need anybody you can do it if you have to. You can completely look after yourself and deal with anything on the road or wherever in life. So I think it's, obviously all the technology these days is great because it means that it gives the comfort to a lot of people and they get out there and travel and see the world. And I still think that travel, although now it's very different to what it was when I did my trip, I still think traveling I think it should be part of every school, whatever, that everybody should spend a year in their life traveling and seeing the world. It's so important to see different cultures, different people, and it just gives you a totally different perspective on life and on the world. And so I think it's so important that people travel, and not be afraid. I think there's so much fear. I really worry these days that there's so much fear in people, which we never used to have. I mean, I remember I left on my trip and I went, yeah, whatever, I'll just work it out as I go along. And, it wasn't this terrible, these terrible things are going to happen to you. And I mean, people did say, you got to be careful, but people just didn't. And I had other friends who just went off and hitchhiked to India or something, or hitchhiked to here, or just got a bus, or what, I don't know. It was just so different. The whole world was out there to be explored. It wasn't there to be frightened of. It was there to be explored and discovered and have fun, and and it's just I don't know. I feel some of that has gone a little bit. That now there is this kind of fear that I think is just because of the media and 24/7 media. Everything's bad news all the time, and and I'm sure the world was just as bad as it was when I went around the world. The difference was I didn't know about it, and what you don't know about, you don't worry about. It's. But if you're bombarded with all this terrible news from all over the world, bad press and bad people and evil people, and this will happen and that will happen, and it's just so unhelpful.
I think that's one of the things which I hear over and over and over again, that people go to places and they are very, very cautious and overly aware because of what media says, what the press has been saying. But once they get there, it's a completely different story. When you talk to the real people, it's welcoming, it's warm, whatever. Of course. I mean, bad people I can find, in my hometown. I can find them down the road if I want to. You know.
So
they're everywhere, but there's still a minority compared to the rest.
Yes, definitely.
I think one of the things which I'm sort of, again, it's something which I haven't heard for the first time, is that you wanted to travel, so you did, full stop. You said, I'll just take it day by day and I'll adapt and do whatever's necessary to keep going. I think that's an important message for anybody today who wants to start traveling, is not to listen to everything you might need or what popular social media says you need. You can still travel very, very simply. You had a bike, you had panniers, and you had stuff in there, but it was boiled down to an absolute minimum, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. But I think also now that I think some people travel for different reasons now, and that's all kind of because of social media. And it's well, I feel, and I suppose I shouldn't really criticise, but I sometimes feel that people. I mean, I've seen people when they arrive at this beautiful, I don't know, place, incredibly beautiful place, and they just get off their bikes and they go, where's the content? Where's the content? Where's the content? Where can I get a picture? Where can I get a selfie? And I just think, just look at where you are. Don't worry about bloody content and getting the right picture, and so you can post it and tell everybody where you are every 5 minutes. It's not what it's about. And it's almost as if that has taken over sometimes, the whole point of it. It's not, you're not there to tell everybody, tell the world what you're doing. You're there to experience it and, meet local people and learn what you can and see these incredible buildings, or I don't know. It's just, so I do worry that, they do see an awful lot through their phone and not really absorb where they are or why they're there.
Missing the important part. I think the first question there is, if you're traveling, who are you traveling for? Yeah,
exactly. And it's almost as if they, and I think also because it's so easy to overplan these things, you actually manage to plan the adventure out, because you make it so boring and so dull, and you know exactly where you're going to be and where you're going to fill up with petrol and where you're going to have your lunch and where you're going to stay that night and where you're going to stay the next Tuesday night and which boat you're going to take. So the whole lot is all kind of planned ahead of you. It just takes the spontaneity out of it and just takes all the adventure out of it. And actually, it's when I always found that it was when things go wrong was when the adventure started.
Yeah.
Because that's when you're just dealing with stuff that's just thrown at you and you have to sort it out. And those are the times. It's not about riding on your bike or, and doing X thousand miles. That's the bike's just the tool. It just gets you. It just allows you to. But and I just think we kind of be nice to go back to base. I mean, when I travel now, I try to travel. I mean, it depends where I'm going. I try to just take an old, Nokia phone. I've still got one of the old basic Nokia phones, which I love. The battery lasts for nearly a week and a half. It's brilliant. And I can get text messages and I can make phone calls. And that's kind of all you need. You don't need anything else.
Yeah, I know. I get that fully. But let me ask you a question there, because if you're planning to do a trip now, do you still like to take a paper map with you, or are you adopting GPS? And do you still prefer to wear a leather jacket of, let's say, 30, 40 years ago, or do you now opt for the additional safety and protection of modern kit?
Okay, well, I always take a paper map with me. Always take a paper map with me. I try, although I don't always succeed, I do try to only use the GPS when I get into towns and cities, because it's quite difficult when you're trying to, negotiate all the traffic and you're trying to find your way and you haven't got a clue where you are. So I tend, but between those, when I'm out of towns and cities, I don't generally use GPS. Sometimes I do, but often I don't. And I do like a map. I still like a map. When it comes to riding gear, I suppose I still wear a leather jacket, but it's a leather jacket with armour in it. So it's sort of, I think that's just daft not to. I think now we have much better gear that's much, obviously if you come off, and the helmets are much better. I mean, my helmet was a 1973 Bell helmet, which I bought half price in LA, which was on sale, and it was about 2 sizes too big for me. I could almost turn my head from side to side in the helmet. It was so big. I had the same visor the whole way back from Australia because I couldn't get another visor. It was so scratched I could barely see out of it most of the time. And then in Australia, I cartwheeled the bike, landed on my head, and had this huge gouge out of the side of my helmet. So I just painted it. So it didn't look quite so bad. But I fell off again. My head's still okay. I think you kind of get a little bit over about it all these days. I think there's so much stuff out there, so much information and technology, and I think it's very easy to get a bit over wrapped up in it all. And so, I just wear a leather jacket with the armor. I've got some Kevlar jeans with the armor. Boots, but I always wore boots on my trip. I always had wore my bike boots, and my helmet is one that actually fit my head these days. So that's an improvement.
So what's the next step? What's the next chapter for you? What are you going to do next?
Well, I've just closed my practice as of like 2 months ago or 3 months ago. And I mean, I'm still doing some consultancy work, but basically all my projects on site and all that is. So I've now got more time on my hands, which is great. I'm still trying to finish off my house in Italy, which is year 7, I think now, but that's nearly there. I've been invited. I'm doing a trip in Pakistan in May. I'm doing 2 or 3 trips in France. I'm doing a book tour in America in September, hopefully. I've got various events organised all during the year. So, I'm busy. I've got lots of stuff, and I've got all my book orders. I'm sending out books every day and writing personalised messages to everybody in all the books. So, it's keep moving. That's what I want to do. Keep moving forward.
Perfect. Your life has been moving all the time.
My life has been great. It has been great. I've had a great life, but I've made it, and I've worked really hard. So, but it's been great. No regrets at all.
Fantastic. Well, I tell you what, that is almost the perfect end to a discussion. No regrets. What an amazing talk. I've been sort of enlightened here. And I hope that also people who are listening to you maybe for the first time, who have been contemplating travel, really pick up on what you've said, that you don't have to plan it. Nothing has to be perfect. Just get up and go out and do it. I think that's the message which you continue to press on people.
Yeah, go and get lost. It's very important to get lost. You don't need to know where you are all of the time. Get lost and find your way. That's the best way to learn.
Fantastic. Elspeth, thank you very much for this amazing conversation. I've loved it. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I hope we will speak again soon.
I hope so.
Thanks for tuning in to the At Overland Europe podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and download our app for more adventures and exclusive content. Remember, you can find our guest social media and websites linked in the description below. Until next time, safe travels.